So, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to incorporate the coach approach. Okay. So in each module, we're going to go through and we're going to share some of what we've learned. Okay, as entrepreneurs, as doing this podcast together, how we've this podcast has very little money behind it, but it's surprising traction. For us, or at least for me. And then we're going to share that, but then we're going to bring in a subject matter expert, someone who really knows the particular topic very well. And you would have saw in an email that went out to everyone a list of who those people are. And the purpose for that is a lot of times you're out there and you're thinking, how am I going to do this? And you think you have to bootstrap and do it all on your own. Okay, if you're a small business owner, there's some people that can help you. And it can really help accelerate the whole thing. So we'd like to introduce you to them, not only so you can learn from them, but also you might want to collaborate with them.
And that's what it's all about, Dave.
Yes.
How many of you actually have listened to The Boiling Point? Be honest. It's okay if you haven't. Wow. Oh, this is awesome. Okay, you already know our dynamic. So if you see us bickering like a little, married couple, you know that that's quite normal. So do not be upset or scared if that happens. So really the opportunity, I thought it was great because a number of years ago, we're going to be talking about Seth Godin again later in the day, but I had the opportunity to connect with a thought leader in my space, somebody I respect a lot, which is Seth Godin, somebody I read on a daily basis. And over the years, I've been able to develop a relationship with him. I would not say a friendship, but he will respond to my emails immediately type of relationship. And I thought it was appropriate because we just released 2 episodes with Seth the last 2 weeks. And I wanted to start with this quote. Your turn. Imagine that the world had no middlemen, no publishers, no bosses, no HR folk, no one telling you what you couldn't do. If you lived in that world, what would you do? Go do that. I just love the simplicity of the way Seth thinks and presents. So in a way, that's what today's opportunity is. We want people to realize that really there are very little barriers for us to reach out, plant our flag, and actually be heard in what we're calling a very noisy marketplace. It is very possible to do. We've interviewed 250,000 of them explaining how this works.
At least.
So that's the opportunity. So we want to walk out with, I'd like to say some new skills, but perhaps maybe a new confidence in knowing that there are ways and tested skills and processes to be able to get out there. And it's not hard, it's not expensive. It just means you got to put the work in and stay consistent. So now we're going to slip over to our challenges. When I say our challenges, I'm referencing Dave and my challenges. Dave and I, and Rochelle, you're part of the story. Did you know that? How did we meet, Rochelle? How did we meet? Yes. Well, it wasn't a hot tub. It was a bathtub. I didn't realize it was going to take that turn.
I met Greg in the hot tub too, so there we go.
Rivers, can we get a microphone over to Rochelle? I'm putting you on the spot. I think this is important because it's the exact time that Dave and I actually met. So, Rochelle, yes, how did you meet Dave and I?
Well, we were on an exporting trip in Bangor, of all places.
That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
Oh my God.
And I don't recall exactly how we all ended up in the tub, but everyone was clothed, by the way.
Yeah.
We were.
I think I was just in my underwear.
Except Greg.
I don't even remember what you were exporting at the time.
I was exporting Greg Hemmings. That's all I had.
Hot tubs.
So, Rochelle, thank you for that. And I didn't even realize how awesomely embarrassing that story is. So, this relates. So, Rochelle and Dave and I were invited on a trade mission by Enterprise St. John, at least a decade
one of the
ago,
sponsors.
15 years ago. I don't even know how long ago. One of our sponsors. So, we went to Bangor, our sister city, across the border, down the airline, and we met a whole bunch of entrepreneurs doing amazing things down there. And one of the things that we realize after going to these trade missions and conferences is you create these really tight bonds when you're doing something interesting with a small group of people. And yes, we ended up, a lot of us, in a bathtub, no water. It was just in a bathtub. And in our photos, and they were funny. And anyhow, I got to meet Dave on that very trip. We were at the Sea Dog Brewery having a pint, and that's where you and I met. And I told you what I was trying to do in my life as a filmmaker with a business that had just failed previously, and I was restarting. And you told me that you were, at the time, working for a medical company, but you were looking into starting a new coaching company, which is where I said, what is that?
Right.
I had no idea what coaching was in the business sense. And we're going to go into this a little bit more in a few minutes. But what Dave and I really bonded on is the fact that we shared the same challenges. It was really neat. So Dave and I go way back. We started our businesses at the exact same time. Dave a little bit before I. And we really lived the startup life in parallel and together, which, again, we will go into in a little bit. Dave, do you want to expand on our challenges that we were?
Yeah, and well, I think the challenges that we're gonna see in a film that we did together, a documentary. Because if you know Greg, he documents everything, right? He said, "That's a great idea. Let's do a documentary." So I said, "Sure." We did the airplane journals. We're going to talk about that in a sec. But what we were struggling with, and to be honest, still struggle with, is this idea of working on your business, right? Can anyone relate to this? This idea that you're in the weeds, you're working, you're just trying to make ends meet, and you're trying to get your proposals out and stuff, but you actually have to step back and work on the business, right? Be a little more strategic. How do I want to be heard? And I see a lot of being tactical and maybe not being as strategic, right? So today's talking about stepping out of that, trying to step back and be more strategic, right? And how can you be heard in a marketplace that's really noisy? But the other thing is, when you start talking about marketing, what's the first thing that comes up in people's mind? Like, we want to do a marketing initiative for your company. What comes up? What's the objection that comes up in your mind? Advertising and money. Yeah, right. It's like, how am I going to pay for this? So, and that's a real challenge. But we want to talk about a process that doesn't require a lot of money. It requires a lot of energy and time and commitment, but it doesn't require a lot of capital. Okay? And I know this because we're going to talk about avatars, but one of our main clients at Vision Coaching is small business owners. And we're running again and again where people are on it and they go, well, if we do marketing, I have to hire a marketing person. And it's like, you don't, actually. There's a bunch of ways to do that. So that's kind of what we've been learning. That's what we want to talk about. But we want to start and just dive into some of these challenges that we're all feeling. And I want to share some of the challenges that you guys shared with us through the survey, which I think is the next slide. So thank you, folks. Now we got the survey out a little late, so we had a number of responses right off the bat. We've subsequently had a lot more. This generally shows it, but people want to communicate with their ideal customer, which is great. They want actionable ideas in terms of how to get by their challenges. A skill set for future opportunities is what they want to get out of this. This is not really about the challenge much, but networking is a challenge. Process improvement. I like this one, how to get better at this after 23 years of business, how to generate sales. I guess that's not uncommon to hear that. So I appreciate whoever shared that. Open-minded, just want to learn, okay? So to overcome challenges. How to reach your target clientele, lead generation techniques. So does anyone else have something that a challenge that they want to overcome that they'd be willing to share?
Hi, so I'm Jillian Nadeau with Uncorked Tours. Make sure everybody sees the pinwheel.
Follow me.
Following, nice.
So Uncorked Tours, we do food and drink tours here in St. John daily through the spring, summer, and fall, and through the winter on the weekends. So put your winter coats on and come have a drink with me. But yeah, I mean, my biggest challenge now, 5 years in, is making sure that my sales funnel stays full with a seasonal business. We bring a lot of guests in the summer, and it drops off in the winter, so that's
Right.
when I need to, again, fill that funnel. But it can be hard sometimes as a solopreneur to make sure that we hit all of those channels and keep that funnel full. So that's kind of one of my big challenges.
Got it.
That is awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you, Julian. I appreciate that. I'm sure many of us, myself included, can relate to that. And the process that Dave and I have extrapolated from all of our interviews, it's going to help you. And it's got a lot to do with very simple and cheap content. So that's awesome. Thanks for being here, Julian. That's great.
Yeah, and you're already doing some cool stuff that I'm seeing. So it's nice to see what's happening.
But I think this whole group could get to the top of that funnel
Yes.
and get uncorked and follow.
Yeah.
Dave, next slide.
We're curious what platforms you're on. Any surprise that Facebook is the most used platform out here? Anyone that surprised anyone? Not at all. Yeah. Email marketing is up there, which is great. I think Kim Houlihan will like seeing that. The variety. There's some people out speaking, which is great to hear. Instagram coming up. It's funny. Trade shows used to be the thing, and they're just kind of falling by the wayside. So just what platforms, and we're going to talk a little bit about platforms and this idea of platform anxiety, right? Like, does anyone feel stressed about like, oh, what am I supposed to do on Twitter or whatever? Or am I the only one? I should be doing that. Instagram. What's an Instagram? You know.
Do I have to do Instagram stories every day?
But the thing is, what we want to do is we want to figure out the platform that's best for you, but also, best for our ideal customer, right? Which leads me, I think, to the next slide. And this is interesting. Do you have a clear, concise picture of who your customer is? And with the more survey, there's more people saying no than yes. Okay, and Alan Gates is going to talk to that with us in a little bit about how we can get really clear. And it took me, I'm going to say about a decade to get clear, just so about who my client was. So I'm thinking, if you're 5 years in and you're getting really clear, that's awesome. What do we have? Oh, here's the challenging slide that was supposed to be earlier. Defining value proposition, right? Great. Staying on top of the conversation. What makes you different? Love that. Our story is not quickly told. Okay, got it. Yeah, does anyone else get frustrated with hearing what's your pitch? What's your elevator pitch? Yeah? Yeah, okay. Because, man, that's hard to do. Location. I've got a great story about how location has actually been being in New Brunswick has been a good thing for my company. Cost, right, of customer groups, generating business, salespeople with disposable income. God, what a good problem to have. I'd love to have that challenge. Post-production still, developing a unique story brand, sticking to it, finding the right platform for my market. Okay, so we're gonna be able to address most of those. And then the last one, how effective are you at sharing your story? And some people are doing a pretty good job, but no one's saying they're 10 out of 10, right? In terms of being highly, highly effective. And some people are saying I'm not effective at all. So perfect. So we got the right group here. This is great. Okay, so thank you for sharing that information with us. Over to you, my friend.
Okay, this is a part, by the way, I can only count maybe twice, and I'm not even joking, where I've been embarrassed in my life. And I'm not going to tell you those two stories because they're embarrassing. I have a very high tolerance of not being embarrassed. So I had a little bit of embarrassment when I watched this video we're about to show. This is the film. Now, it's probably an ungodly 1 hour long. We're not going to watch that much. We're going to watch about 3 minutes of the film that Dave and I made together when we first met. Okay? Now, as a filmmaker, I want you to be very gracious and forgiving because it's not very well produced. Hemmings House has become better since I stopped being the one making the films, and we got professionals doing it. And Dave had a lot more hair. So did I, actually.
Oh! You didn't even let me say it.
Right. So this is called the Airplane Journals. The neat thing about this...
I've been promoting this as the documentary to watch because of the awesome filmmaking, just so you know.
Have you
so
really?
thank you.
Have
you.
Thank you, Dave. Wow,
I
blessings.
have. It'd be amazing. We can talk about how far this has reached, too.
But and we should actually release this whole film online with a little caveat at the beginning that wasn't made yesterday, okay? So the neat thing about this
I think
is,
people will know when they see our profile.
yeah, Dave and I, like I said, we met, and I'm just trying to figure out how long ago that was. Well, I incorporated Hemmings House in 2006, so it must have been 2005 when we met. Let's just say it was 05. So in 2006, I think is when we started filming this. We met each other in Bangor, in the not in the hot tub, in the bathtub. Then we were like, how do we work together? Dave didn't have money to hire my services, but after he told me what an executive coach was, I was like, that's exactly what I need. I need a coach because I failed my last business, failed in a good way. I learned a lot. It was like my MBA. It was starting a business with two friends, and there's a lot of interesting things I can tell you about that. Going into business with friends is very fun and awesome, but there are some things that you can learn at the very beginning of that relationship that will save you a lot of pain down the road. Suffice it to say, I had a company doing media productions for 3 years before Hemmings House, and I needed a coach. So Dave and I just decided to do a trade-off service deal. So I was like, Dave, you're a brand new coach in the industry. I'm new at positioning myself as a corporate video maker. Why don't we make a documentary of you coaching me? Which was a really neat experience. Dave, do you want to quickly talk about that beginning point about us deciding to do this before we go into it?
Well, so who knows what? I'll ask you guys a question. Who knows exactly what business or leadership coaching is? Okay, a few people. Good. The marketplace doesn't know, right? And what's interesting is when we coach someone, what I found was they would repeat the business. They would refer people. And what was frustrating is that it's a vague service that's being offered. So I thought, what if we could have someone being documented, being coached, and people could learn through that experience. So we create this great project, right? And I mean, so at the time I got in the coaching industry. I was 33 years old. I think the average age was probably 52 or 51. So I kind of recognize I had an uphill battle here. Like, how am I going to be credible? And we're going to talk about having credibility in the marketplace. So we started this process, and I thought, this will be great. We'll document, Greg being coached, and then Greg said, well, I had this challenge in the other business, and I thought this could be a disaster, right? Because if we do a film about a guy whose business crashes, it's not going to be so good for coaching.
Well, it would have been an
But we
interesting film
learned
to
a
watch.
lot through that we're going to tie into this. Okay, so is that what you're looking for?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So here's Dave, young Dave. Young Greg's coming up here.
I look exactly the same.
So
That's
I'm
right.
going to show you, I think, let's say 5 minutes into the
I
film.
look heavier there.
Check. My name is Greg Hemmings. I'm a television producer, young entrepreneur, adventurer, and a blogger. This story begins a little over a year ago at a Christmas party in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada. I chatted with this guy I met at the party. The guy's name is Dave Vale. Meeting Dave is where I start the story. But hold on, let's rewind a bit. The year was 1995, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I had an interest in filmmaking, so I ended up starting an exciting production company with 3 of my friends. Our first project was called East Coast Breakdown, a documentary about the Atlantic Canadian bluegrass scene. Music documentaries, however, were becoming my passion.
Things that you say, and look at you, way up there.
And we started producing a lot of them. Documentaries like Revolve, Songs of Solidarity, and A Head's Tale.
Coming of age now,
We learned a lot about business, partnerships, video production, and most of all, about relationships. We also got into a lot of trouble financially with none of us having any clue how to deal with the books. It didn't take long before I realized that filmmaking wasn't all fun and adventure. In fact, I would argue that only 5% of the time you're producing. The other 95% you're running a business. Yes, we were running our business. Unfortunately, we were running it into the ground. Don't get me wrong, we did find a lot of success. We were becoming known in the business community and also in the television and music communities. I even was honored with the Young Entrepreneur of the Year award from the St. John Board of Trade. One of our first projects was a motocross instructional video, led by world motocross legend Marty Smith. We were honored with an Extreme Award in Los Angeles for Best Instructional Video. I was nominated for Music Industry Professional of the Year at the East Coast Music Awards, and we were in the paper all the time. Things looked great on the outside for sure, but we were falling apart on the inside. This is where we get to the part of the story where I meet Coach Dave. Dave asked me a question. Do you want to continue living in an unhealthy working environment, or do you want to make a fresh start? Heavy words to hear when you're an entrepreneur trying to find your way. I thought about this over the next 6 months. And when things with our business went from bad to worse, my 2 partners and I decided to part ways. As it turned out, Dave also left his company and started a new one, all centered around business coaching. What is business coaching? I asked him. He told me, business coaching is about partnering with a leader and unleashing their full potential. So here I am now, over a year later, recording this podcast summarizing the wild ride. Let's rewind one more time to the first time that Dave and I met to discuss my coaching relationship with him. I I didn't get that first coaching session on tape, but he requested that I fill out a thing that he called a 360 feedback form. This is where I send out a questionnaire to 10 or so people who know me well enough and that I trust to give honest feedback. I send it mostly to people who have hired me in the past, people who I've worked for, people who have worked for me or with me, and others who I just plain old respect in the business community. It was a weird and humbling experience to go through this actually, but I was curious to see what the results would be. Dave and I would then meet to have our first coaching session to get the ball rolling.
What it is about coaching that you know at this point that helped you to take the plunge?
I don't have too much being coached experience, and I guess that's kind of the purpose of me doing this documentary, is to really find out what the purpose and the philosophy of coaching is.
What are the opportunities you're not taking the most advantage of? What are you looking for?
I've got a ton of potential. I've got a lot of great ideas. Being coached through that would be very beneficial because I'm wasting too much time doing, fixing up mess ups when I should be behind a camera, editing, producing, directing.
Right.
I went into it expecting Dave to give me the 3 steps to success. But instead, he started asking me probing questions to help me discover what was keeping me from achieving my true potential.
What is it that you need to be doing between now and the next time we meet?
What I learned was that coaching is about action. My actions coming from this session were to hire an accountant and a bookkeeper. I was spending way too much time doing something I wasn't good at. The second action was to get the 360 feedback form completed. It was probably the most pride-defeating, eye-opening experience I ever put myself through. I read all my strengths first. It was encouraging, but I already knew most of my strengths. It said things like, Greg is a nice guy, he's creative, honest, positive, friendly, easy to get along with, yada yada yada. That was all fine and well, but then I had to read my weaknesses. Wait, Dave calls them growth areas. I read things like,
Oh my gosh, I can't believe I stopped it right there before I read
Perfect.
this.
We're going to talk about those right now. All right. So each section we got a podcast kind of version, right, where I'm going to interview Greg. We're going to talk about challenges and opportunities. What did you think of airplane journals? Yeah. Hey, come on, it's great.
Hey, how many people recognize some of my 360 survey participants? Next time you see Monica or Steve or anybody, just compliment them on their lip syncing.
I miss that hair.
I miss my hair too. I've got the insecurity hat on right here, which just covers the.
So let's go into it. Let's talk a little bit because I think everyone can relate to this. But you start, and who were you trying to sell to? Like you've had the experience before. You want to be a storyteller. You recognize some of the challenges that you want to get through. But really, who would you want to sell to?
Well, at the beginning, so Hit Media was my first company with my friends Glenn and Andrew Tidby. And we started as a television company. So we really wanted to make TV shows and documentaries. As a result of being able to produce a few things like that, we were attracting a little bit of attention from the local business community to ask us to do some corporate videos, which is not what we were in business to do, but we ended up finding a little bit of success in doing videos. When Hit Media collapsed and I started Hemmings House again, I was intentional in creating a company that was storytelling company. It wasn't a TV company, a documentary company, or commercial company. We were a storytelling company. But at that time, Dave, everybody needed a story, right?
So tell me more about that.
I was trying to sell our services to every single target demographic I could find, whether you were a business, whether you were a big broadcaster, whether you were a non-for-profit, didn't matter what service or product you were selling, what type of business. I cast the net really, really wide. And what I found, Dave, is when I did that, it was very hard to actually claim a position in the market and say, no, I am worth my daily rates because I am the go-to filmmaker for this niche. I did not understand that concept. I tried to go far and wide, and it was financially detrimental to do that.
Okay. So tell me a little bit at the time, what did the industry look like, and how did you become recognized in the industry?
Yeah, well, the industry back then, it was a good time for us to start in video in St. John because when I went to film school, it was all film. It was actually silver alloy film, and we would, You know, to roll 7 minutes of film in a cartridge was about $700. You know, so it wasn't easy to make films back in the film days. When video started entering into a place where the quality was looking good enough, comparable to film, not as good as film, the entry point for cost to get the gear was very expensive. I was able, through the previous company, to be able to get enough equipment, really high-end equipment, to be able to start competing in that market where others just would not have been able to because it was so cost prohibitive to get a good HD camera, for example, with $15,000. You know, but through a number of other television projects that we had, we were able to create a little stockpile of good gear. Back then, there was we didn't have any real sense of budget either. You know, like we didn't have any headlights. You know, headlights into, okay, we got money now, let's spend it on this. But like, there's no planning. You know, and that's where the concept of attracting advisors came very, very clear to me through coaching with you, Dave. Do not spend time doing things that you're not good at, including keeping care of the books, for example. It's not that I'm not good at keeping books, it's just that that's not what my focus should be. But how many hours was I spending doing that? Let's get an advisor, let's get a CFO, let's get some bookkeepers. What about other areas of expertise that I didn't have, like marketing and sales and all these sort of things? Since you and I were coaching, I started to attract advisors around me to start to deal with some of these challenges. And that was the best thing I could do because I realized I'm only good at the thing I can focus all my time on.
Got it. Okay. Well, let's go back to the idea of trying to cast your net too wide. So you obviously overcame that. What was it that you did to get more niche and more focus?
Well, it was interesting because all along, even since I was a little kid, I had a heart for people and animals. And I remember, my brother would remember this as well, on Bonnercourt Drive, where we grew up on the east side, I remember these Yahoo boys. It's always boys. Girls don't kill frogs. These boys were getting frogs and smushing them. And it sounds kind of funny, but it was so cruel, and I didn't understand why they were doing that. And I was very upset at that. And that's the earliest memory. I was probably 4 years old or 5 or something. My earliest memory of justice for living things, you know. And then as time went on, I started to, you know, go to school and witness bullying. Thankfully, I went through life really without being bullied in school. I was very, very fortunate. However, I saw it and I defended it fiercely because it did not make sense why humans would be mean to each other. I didn't understand that concept. And so all going through the school system, that was always something that was very important to me. So when I transitioned into business and realized that business as adults is filled with bullies, the film industry specifically was filled with bullies. It was attraction to greedy people, and greedy people will sacrifice the well-being of other people to get what they want. I was very confused because I had to participate in growing a business in that environment.
Right.
So over the last 5 or 6 years, we've really been focusing on using our company and our stories as a force for good, and really working with companies that we believe have a heart for the same thing, which has helped us create a bit of a niche that is so unique. It shouldn't be unique. I hope in a few years it's not going to be unique anymore, but it's so unique that as a decision to stay focused on social impact and making positive change with our stories and our companies, we've been able to create a brand new export market in the U.S. So the B Corporation movement is all around the world, but it's heavy density in the U.S., and there's not many television production companies or filmmakers in that space. So we have found a niche that is working, and it's all based on values, not even on strategy, right? This was not a strategic move. This is just me trying to find my tribe, and for my tribe to find me, which goes all the way back to everything that you and I talk about.
Yeah.
So we found a niche, Dave. It's not a service it's not a particular type of company or industry that we're looking to work with. We're looking for the hearts of the businesses that we're working
It's almost
with.
like a movement.
Yes, it's completely a
I
movement.
think you latched onto a movement, and you've really embraced it, and you've shared it with me. It's really helped. It spawned a thing called the $1 Million Pledge and a lot of things as a result of.
And will we be able to
your
talk about the $1 Million Pledge today?
Yeah, later today,
Good.
for sure. So last question, and this is about surviving and being heard. So what did you, you find a niche, you get a sense of, okay, this is what I want to be doing. It's value driven. So now, how do people know about you and what you do and how you do it?
Well, as I
you
fell
guys.
into that new market in the U.S. And started speaking at conferences, it's really interesting because we've got this thing in Atlantic Canada where I don't know if it's because we've been told all of our lives, or maybe we tell the stories ourselves that we're not good enough, or we're not strong enough, or talented enough to compete in export markets. I got to tell you, that's a complete lie. It's amazing to see what type of grit that we have as Atlantic Canadians, and work ethic and creative export that we have, how impressed our colleagues and friends south of the border are of us. I know in Atlantic Canada, we're all very competitive. Like, if you live in Halifax, you think New Brunswick is a bunch of, backwoods people, and whatever. It doesn't matter what size. There's always a smaller community that you can knock down. We've got a little bit of that in Atlantic Canada. We're trying to change that. But in these markets that I've been developing or have had the opportunity to be invited into, they love the fact that we're from a quirky little place in the eastern coast of Canada. They see the values that come out of this community, and they see our work ethic. So as just by me being me, and by me being able to share content on a daily basis, people started to understand who I was. And this is a really neat difference. It was far less about me trying to find my new customer demographic and my avatar of who the perfect client is. They started finding me because I started showing up to conferences and people already knew who I was. And I had no idea who they were at all. And I was like, how is this happening? And I started getting asked to public speak at conferences, at large conferences, from California to New York, and all the big sustainability conferences and social impact conferences. I've been able to been fortunate enough to be attracted as a name in there. Yeah, so it's a little bit of a reverse strategy than I thought. I thought I'd have to be picking up the phone, calling all these people and trying to connect with them. But as we're going to share through the rest of the day, we didn't have to do that.
No.
But the one thing that's critically important, Dave, is I had to figure out who was buying my services. Who was it that I had to honor and and pay attention to. And for me, that was the CMOs, the marketing officers, and the CSRs, the corporate social responsibility folks, and CEOs. So those are three different types of avatars, three different types of people that I need to speak to. So when you read my LinkedIn blogs, it's very business focused. So I really want either a CEO, a CMO, or a CSR person to read that content, right?
Awesome.
That's three of my avatars.
Yeah.
But then you've got this other set of our avatars, which are your supporters, your friends, your followers, the people who will never necessarily spend any money on you, but they're the ones that have your back. They're the ones that share your content to people that might become your customers. And those are the people that I've been able to serve content to through a lot of the popular social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, and blogging on Medium, for example. And the podcast world fits both of those. So finding that niche avatar, Dave, it's been a fun process, and I haven't perfected it yet either. It's an evolving process. Talking about not being perfect,
Yeah.
this is an ongoing process.
I'm smiling because I remember meeting with Greg in the basement of his house before he's married, and I didn't even want to step into the washroom.
Oh,
'cause
come
it was-
on,
it was
Dave.
so bad, you know what I mean? And then he's speaking at New York and all stuff. So it's kind of a neat trajectory, right? And when we're sharing these stories, we're not saying we've made it. We're just saying, this is the journey we've been on, right? So, and this is a lesson, and we're going to share the lessons we've learned. So, do you hear yourself in this story at all at different parts? Does anyone? Yeah? Okay, cool. Greg needs to pee. So he
You
told
probably
me
all
that,
heard
he
that as the
told-
microphones
he-
were on.
He
I was
told
like,
me that,
"Do I have
a few
time to
times
go to the
before I had-
washroom?"
And I said, you don't have time to go to the washroom now. You got to do this slide, then we're taking a break, and we're coming back at 10:30.
So it was really interesting. When Dave and I decided to put on some sort of an event, we wanted to package all of this knowledge together in something. So we will be releasing a digital version of this where people online can have the same experience you guys are, but not in person. And we're like, everybody's got a process.
An edited version.
An edited version, that's right. Everybody's got a process. We need a process. So we just call it the Boiling Point 4-step process. And we found 4 really good steps that we're going to talk about. Now, there's so many steps to creating a position of thought leadership, into being content creators. But for us as businesses using content, the steps that we're going to talk about this afternoon is identifying your avatar being your ideal customer. Literally creating a pretend profile of a person that you want to sell to. What does she look like? What type of music does she listen to? Where does she work? What type of sports does he like to play? Or
What values do they hold?
values does he have? Creating names to these avatars. And all of our companies have multiple avatars as well. Like I said before, one of the avatars for my company is television broadcasters, and they're network executives. They're a very, very different type of beast than a creative director at an agency or somebody in CSR in a small business. These are different types of avatars that we create, and how do we talk to them specifically? And pretending, figuring out what type of magazines that they read, where do they get their content, where do they hang out? And I'm really excited to have a conversation with Alan from Bonfire later on to talk about that deeper. Becoming a subject matter expert. All of us are experts in our field, but we can always do better. We are lifelong learners. So we're going to talk about different ways that we typically become experts or sharpen our expertise, because to be able to put content out and be received legitimately, you have to know your stuff. Like, there's no getting around that part. So that's a critical thing that we can all keep ourselves in check with, myself included. If you ask me about the best cameras to use today, I would completely be BSing you, because I don't know. I am not an expertise in what the latest film gear is. I've got some awesome people around me who are, but that's not me. So knowing your expertise and speaking to your expertise is critical. Being seen as a thought leader. I put a really interesting word there, which is seen. This is a perspective. You cannot put your hand up and say, I'm a thought leader. That's not how it works. Your people have to say, oh, Greg is a thought leader in the space of storytelling for positive social impact in the commercial space. You know, somebody else has to give you that title. But how do you earn that title? How do you get invited to speak at conferences? Better yet, how do you get invited to get paid at conferences to speak? Well, once that starts happening, you realize you've earned a position of thought leadership. And creating content and telling stories and sharing other people's stories is part of doing that. And the very last step is build and speak to that community. It's not about earning it and leaving. It's about earning it and nurturing it and continuing to speak to it. All with the heart of not making more money from this group of people, but to serving these people. And again, there's a lot of the same language that Seth talks about, and this is why I'm attracted to his philosophy. I did not learn this from Seth. This is the way that Dave and I have been doing business since the beginning. But it's really awesome to see a movement in capitalism today where people are like, this isn't just about making money. This is about making the world a better place. And to do that, we have to see ourselves as community and as neighbors and people who respect each other. So that's the 4 steps that we're going to go over.
Yeah, and we were going to add a 5th step, but we already called it the 4th step, but it's about action, right? It's about doing something. It's about getting out there. It's having a plan. We're going to talk about that, because that's otherwise it's just a nice idea. Who cares, right? So it's about taking action. And we're not saying this is the way you need to do it. We're just saying this is what we've learned. This works for us. Where do you find yourself? How do you fit into this, okay? So it's not like, so I just want to be careful around that, because everyone's going to find their own path and their own way. But you might see parts of yourself in here if you follow this process.
Yeah, so what we're going to do now is have a quick break.
pee
You're going to see me run in a particular direction. So fill yourself with water and coffee, all of this, and then Rivers is going to, how many?
We got 15 minutes.